The Harbor Light Diner smelled of stale coffee and desperation, a 24-hour beacon in the neon-soaked rain of Port Armitage. It was neutral ground, which was the only reason Cassian D'Amico was there. He sat in the back booth, his suit a shadow against the cracked vinyl, nursing a black coffee he had no intention of drinking. Across from him, the loud-mouthed captain of the Longshoremen's Union was sweating, his proposals growing more frantic. Cassian was known as the quiet Don of the D'Amico family, a man who had inherited an empire of steel and shadow and preferred to rule it with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Tonight's negotiation was a formality, a tedious but necessary piece of theater to maintain the peace at the docks. He was about to cut the meeting short when a flash of movement at the counter booth caught his eye. It was a child, a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with dark, serious eyes and hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was sitting with a man in a nondescript gray coat and a woman whose smile was a masterpiece of polished, empty warmth. Cassian watched, his focus shifting instantly from the Union man's bluster. The girl, Juniper June Whitaker, was meticulously arranging sugar packets on the laminate tabletop. She took one, then another, pushing them into a precise triangle. Then, with a final pink packet, she formed a Z that interlocked with the shape. A cold, sharp shock went through Cassian, a feeling of adrenaline reserved for moments of absolute clarity. He kept his face impassive, but his gaze hardened. The girl's hands vanished from the table. A moment later, a paper napkin fluttered to the floor. The man in the gray coat didn't notice. The woman with the perfect smile was looking at her phone. The girl bent to retrieve it. She sat up, and 2 seconds later, the napkin fell again. She picked it up. 1 second later, it fell a third time. A 2-1 rhythm. The Zeta Triangle. It wasn't just a signal. It was a ghost, a piece of Ordinance 12, the secret charter created by his grandfather's generation. It was a code of ethics and alarms for men who lived outside the law but answered to a higher, internal standard. His father had spoken of it only once, his voice heavy. The Zeta Triangle, combined with a 2-1 distress beat, was the most archaic and desperate plea in their lexicon. Cassian's eyes swept the diner. The man in the gray coat now had his hand on the little girl's shoulder. It looked like a gesture of paternal affection, but Cassian saw the pressure, the way the man's fingers dug just slightly into the child's small frame. The woman opposite them finally looked up, her smile unwavering, the kind of smile that concealed rather than revealed. A woman walked back toward the booth, her steps betraying an exhaustion that went bone deep. Sloane Whitaker, the mother. She set a glass of water on the table, her movements jerky, trying too hard to be normal. As she slid into the booth next to her daughter, her gaze swept the room in a panicked, searching arc. Her eyes met Cassian's for less than a second. In that fraction of time, he saw it all: raw terror, a desperate plea for help, and the immediate, reflexive mask of indifference that slammed down as she looked away. She knew she had been seen, and it terrified her more. The voice of Cassian's father echoed in his memory, as clear as if he were sitting beside him. If you see the Z in the triangle and the 2-1 beat, Cassian, you do not wait. It means the law is the enemy. It means official channels are not just compromised, they are the weapon. So, we agree. Don D'Amico, the Union man blustered, oblivious. Cassian's bodyguard, Marco, shifted beside him, sensing the change in the air, the sudden drop in temperature. "Boss, we should go," Marco murmured, his hand near his jacket. Cassian raised one finger from his lap, a simple, silent command: stop. He did not break his stare from the family's booth. The man in the gray coat gestured for the check. He paid in cash, too quickly. The four of them stood up. The perfect smile woman ran a hand over the little girl's hair. "Such a clumsy girl today," the woman said, her voice like smooth, cold glass. June flinched. As she did, her elbow connected with her glass of milk. It toppled, splashing white across the dark table. The girl gasped, a genuine sound of fear, but her eyes, for a split second, flicked toward Cassian. He watched the spill. The milk ran. splitting into two distinct, perfectly parallel lines before pooling at the table's edge. Another signal. The final one, we are being watched. Cassian stood. The Union man and Marco both startled. The negotiation is over, Cassian said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the diner's ambient noise. He dropped a $100 bill on the table. My terms stand. Do not contact me again. He moved before Marco could, striding toward the exit, his long coat settling around him. The family was already out the door, moving toward a silver SUV parked under a flickering streetlight. Marco, Cassian said without turning. The silver SUV, license plate Kilo 5 Victor. Have Enzo tail them. No contact, just eyes. And us, boss. We follow, too. Cassian stepped out into the rain. Get my car. Keep 3 lengths behind Enzo. He slid into the driver's seat of his own sedan, the engine turning over with a silent, powerful hum. The SUV pulled out, and Cassian let 2 cars get between them before he eased into traffic. He drove with effortless focus, his mind a cold engine of calculation. He was 2 blocks behind them when he saw it in his rearview mirror. The little girl, June, had turned around in the back seat. She was pressed against the rear window, her small face pale in the taillight glow. She was mouthing one word, help. Cassian's gaze lifted from the child to the street post they were passing. He lowered his driver's side window just an inch, enough to sharpen the focus of the night. There, mounted just below the cross-street sign, was the unmistakable glint of a microcam lens, its tiny red pinprick of light aimed directly at the departing SUV. Someone wasn't just taking this family. They were filming it, documenting it. The question burned in Cassian's mind, colder and harder than the Port Armitage rain. Ordinance 12 was a relic, a secret buried with the men who built this city on honor and blood, who in God's name had taught a 9-year-old girl a distress call that only a Dawn would know. By 3 a.m., the silver SUV was a ghost in the system, but Cassian's technical team, operating from a soundproofed room beneath a forgotten D'Amico bakery, dealt in ghosts. The license plate Kilo 5 Victor was registered not to a person, but to a corporate entity, Northbridge Wellness, a family support center praised in glossy city-funded magazines. The money trail, however, led to the Aegis Meridian Fund. Aegis Meridian, Cassian said, his voice quiet in the dim light of the operations center. He was looking at a flow chart on a screen that dwarfed him. Aegis is a shell, funded by Gideon Rook. Northbridge Wellness is a tentacle of the Northbridge Combine. Gideon Rook. The name hung in the air like an unlit fuse, a rival who had risen to prominence by operating in the digital shadows, not the docs. The information on Sloan and Juniper Whitaker was harder to get. It was too clean, too sealed. By 4:30 a.m., his team found the document, a temporary custody order, filed just that afternoon. June was to be in the supervised care of Northbridge Wellness, pending a hearing. The order was issued by the FCCA, the Federal Crime and Commerce Authority. There is no such agency, Cassian stated. That's the problem, boss, his lead tech, Ivy, said, not looking up from her keyboard. The digital signature is valid, the stamp. That's not a federal stamp, but it cleared the county clerk's server. How? It didn't go through the server, Ivy said, her fingers flying. It was issued by the server. An internal Aegis Meridian machine pushed the credentials. It's a backdoor, a digital phantom. The file on Sloan Whitaker was thin until it wasn't. She was a data security engineer. Her last employer was the Saitore Foundation. She had filed an internal report 3 months ago, a whistleblower report. She flagged a massive overspend on cloud computing contracts, routing through shell companies that, Cassian noted, all led back to Aegis Meridian. 2 weeks after her report, the first petition was filed against her parental unfitness. They aren't just taking her child, Cassian realized aloud. They are silencing her by proving she's unstable, and they are using a fake federal agency to make it legal. He left the ops center and walked to his private study. On the wall, Among photos of his grandfather's olive groves in Sicily was a framed black and white picture. His father, younger, prouder, stood with his arm around a scrappy-looking teenager. Cassian took the photo down. The teenager was scowling, but his eyes held a flicker of gratitude. He remembered the story, a warehouse fire, a setup by a rival crew. His father had received the Zeta Triangle from an unknown source. He went in when the police stood down. He pulled this kid out of the fire, saving him from the flames and the law. The kid's name was Cal Rook, Gideon Rook's younger brother. Cal had died 2 years later in what the papers called a tragic industrial accident at a different warehouse. The D'Amico family knew it was an internal hit by the Combine. Cal had become a liability. Gideon had used his brother's death as a stepping stone. The debt his father had paid was forgotten, replaced by a bitter, one-sided feud. At 9 a.m., Cashin met May Halden in a private courtyard at the city law library. May was one of the few lawyers in Port Armitage he trusted. She wore a severe suit and an expression of perpetual impatience. She had been his father's protégé, and she owed her education to the D'Amico Fund. FCCA, she said, sipping black tea. It's beautiful. In a sociopathic way. I pulled the metadata. The document is real. Cassian, it's filed. It's in the system. If she fights it, she's fighting the state. She'll lose. It's a ghost. A ghost with the full authority of the county court's digital signature, May corrected. They didn't just hack the system. They are the system. What do you want me to do? Find a seam, Cashin said. A procedural error, a typo, anything. And you, I'm going to talk to the mother. He found Sloane Whitaker at her apartment. The silver SUV was gone, replaced by a black sedan parked across the street. Cassian's gaze swept the block, noting the dome camera on the corner light pole and the two men in generic neighborhood security jackets. He recognized the logo, a stylized swan. The Black Swan Unit, Rook's private surveillance team. Cassian entered through the building's underground garage, bypassing the lobby. He knocked on her door, once, twice. The door opened on a chain. Sloane's eyes were wide, red-rimmed, and utterly devoid of the fear he had seen in the diner. Now, they held only a cold, hard defiance. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice raw. "I saw the signals, Miss Whitaker." "I don't know what you're talking about." The triangle, the Z, the 2-1 beat, the parallel lines. Her face crumpled, just for a second, before she rebuilt the wall. "Go away. I don't need your kind of help. I know who you are. You're D'Amico." "They are listening to you right now," Cassian said, his voice low, not moving from the doorway. "The men across the street, the Black Swan Unit." She tried to close the door, and he didn't stop her, but he spoke into the closing gap. "I am not here to offer a favor." Her hand stopped. The door remained open by the width of the chain. "I am here," Cassian said, his eyes meeting hers, "to pay a debt. Someone used that code to save my family, a long time ago. I am honoring the ordinance." Sloane stared at him, her breath catching. The name, the code, it meant something to her. "What do they have?" he asked. "They have June," she choked out. "They took her for evaluation to Northbridge Wellness. They said I was unstable. The FCCA is not real." "But the papers are," she hissed, tears of rage, not sorrow, spilling over. "I'm a data engineer, Mr. D'Amico. I know a secure signature when I see one. I can't fight it." "You can't," Cassian agreed. "But we can. Let me help you." "Help me how by starting a war I won't trade my daughter's freedom for your protection." "This isn't protection," Cassian said softly. "This is an extraction. They used a digital weapon. We will use a sharper one." He returned to his operations center. "The Black Swan Unit is on her. They're sloppy. Think they're invisible." He turned to Ivy. "I want Aegis Meridian. I want every donor, every contract, every dollar. Do not touch the Combine. Do not alert Gideon Rook. I want the foundation he's standing on to crack first." Ivy's screen filled with code. "I'm in." Cashin looked at the flow chart again, connecting the dots himself. Rook uses Aegis as a clean front. He pushes the fake FCCA papers to flag unfit parents who are a problem for him. Northbridge Wellness gets legal custody. Then what? Ivy's screen flashed. A new file. A program within Northbridge. "Oh, God," Ivy whispered. "What is it?" "The International Study Support Program. They're not just taking the children. Cassian, they're exporting them." The hospital parking garage was a concrete cavern, smelling of damp cement and exhaust. Sloane waited by the main elevator, her body rigid, a sentinel guarding a door she was not allowed to pass through. The scheduled checkup for June was on the 7th floor, in a wing leased entirely by Northbridge Wellness. She had been ordered to wait here. A black sedan, sleek and silent as a shark's fin, slid into the empty space beside her. The window lowered, revealing Cassian D'Amico, and he wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the surveillance camera pointed at the elevator bay. "They're watching you," he said, his voice a low vibration that barely carried. "But they are not watching me." He held up his phone, the screen facing her. It was not a text, but a photograph, a high-resolution image of June taken at the Harbor Light Diner. She was smiling, a genuine, gap-toothed smile, her face illuminated by the jukebox light, captured in the split second before the man in the gray coat had put his hand on her shoulder. Sloane's breath hitched. A sound, half sob, half gasp, escaped her. "My team took this," Cashin said. "Proof of their surveillance. Proof of her." Sloane's composure cracked. She moved to the car, pulling the door open and sliding into the passenger seat, seeking shadow rather than sanctuary. The rain began to fall outside, a heavy, relentless drumming on the car's roof, isolating them in the sudden gloom. They call her Juniper," Sloane whispered, her eyes fixed on the photo of the smiling girl. "It's so formal, so cold. You called her June." "It's her name," Cassian said simply, as if it were the most obvious fact in the world. He put the phone away. They sat in the confined space, the air thick with unspoken words. He was a man of immense, quiet power. She was a woman who had lost all of hers. The leather of the seats, the clean scent of the car's interior. It was a world away from the sterile panic of the waiting room. "She has nightmares," Sloane said, her voice hollow. She was talking to the dashboard, to the rain, to anyone but him. She keeps counting in her sleep, just 2 numbers, over and over, 2, 1, 2, 1. She doesn't even know she's doing it. A muscle in Cassian's jaw tightened. She's reinforcing the signal, making sure she doesn't forget how to call for help. "Who are you?" Sloane asked, finally turning to him. The proximity was unsettling. He wasn't large in the way of his bodyguards, but he possessed a density, a stillness that consumed the space around him. That signal, Ordnance 12, what is it? Cashin looked out at the rain-slicked concrete. It was a promise. A long time ago, men with power decided they had a duty that the law did not, an oath to protect the weak, not because they were asked, but because they could. It wasn't about glory. It was about placing faith in something other than yourself. The first real spark of connection ignited in Sloane's eyes, a flicker of understanding beneath the fear. Why me? Mr. D'Amico, why do this for me? Cassian turned his head. His gaze was direct, steady, and held no pity, only fact. Because when I found you, you were in a diner, terrified. You were cornered by people with absolute power. And you are the only person I have ever met in that position who asked for nothing. Nothing but her safety. His words hung in the air, landing with a weight that settled her, grounded her. The attraction was there, sharp and dangerous and completely inappropriate, a low-voltage current in the air between them. It was not about desire. It was about recognition. He saw her. As if summoned by the tension, her phone buzzed violently in her coat pocket. She fumbled for it, her hands shaking. She read the email, and what little color she had drained from her face. What is it? The FCCA. They They've scheduled the hearing, the parental competency assessment. It's tomorrow. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. That's less than 24 hours. Cassian did not react. He simply processed, analyzed, and planned. May warned me they would move fast. They want to rush this before you can mount a defense. I have no defense, she cried, the panic returning. May said the papers are legal. They're ghosts, but they're real ghosts. They will take her. Then we will give them something else to fight. Cassian's focus was absolute. We will have to play a role. May is already preparing a file. When you go to court tomorrow, you will not be alone. I will be with you. As who your bodyguard, they'll laugh us out of the room. No, I will be your compliance consultant, a specialist hired by Saitore's internal audit board to investigate your whistleblower claim. I will be there to present evidence that your data was breached by the FCCA. Sloan stared at him. You're going to use my case to expose their data in their own hearing. We will make them defend their own legitimacy, Cassian said. We will make the ghost show itself. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was the first time in months Sloan had felt anything other than despair. She looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as a Mafia Don, but as the man who had shown her a picture of her daughter's smile. She held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary. Trust. It was a fragile, unfamiliar seed, but it was beginning to take root. The elevator chimed. Sloan was out of the car in an instant. June stepped out, flanked by the woman with the perfect smile. June looked small, pale, and terribly composed. Juniper, we're leaving, the woman said, taking her hand. June's eyes found her mother, and then, with a child's unerring instinct, found the man standing silently beside her. She saw Cassian. Her small hand, the one not being held, went to her pocket. She pulled out a small folded napkin from the hospital cafeteria. Her fingers moved, a frantic, tiny motion, folding it twice, a 1. Cassian moved, smoothly and without aggression, and placing himself between the woman and the child, he knelt, bringing himself down to June's eye level. The woman stiffened, but Cassian's presence was so assured, so calm that she hesitated, unsure how to react. That's a very clever signal, June, and he said, his voice soft. My father taught me about it. June's eyes widened. But it's an alarm. For when you are in danger, I want to teach you a new one, a quiet one. For when you know good people are near. He moved slowly. You touch your ear, he said, tapping his own, to say, I am listening. You touch your shoulder. He tapped his shoulder, to say, I am strong, and you touch your heart. He pressed his fingers to his chest, to say, I am safe. Ear, shoulder, heart. June watched him, her expression unblinking. Slowly. She raised her own tiny hand. She touched her ear, her shoulder, her heart. A silent promise passed between the Dawn and the child. We have to go, the woman said, her voice strained, pulling on June's arm. Cassian stood up, his gaze unreadable. Sloan rushed forward, opening the back door of the Northbridge car for her daughter. I'll see you tomorrow, baby, she said, her voice thick. As Sloan leaned in to buckle June's seatbelt, her hand was trembling so violently she couldn't fasten the clip. Cassian's hand covered hers, warm, steady, and sure. He guided the buckle into its slot, his skin brushing hers. It was a simple, functional touch, but it shot through Sloan like lightning. She froze, her knuckles brushing the back of his hand before pulling away as if burned. The door slammed shut. The car pulled away. Sloan stood watching it go, her hand still tingling from the contact, the rain cold on her face, and a terrifying, fragile hope blooming in her chest. The Ravensmouth County courtroom was paneled in dark wood that seemed to absorb all light and hope. Sloan sat rigid, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white, beside her. Cassian looked more like a high-priced corporate lawyer than she did, his suit immaculate, his expression one of polite, clinical interest. June was not present. She was being held in a child welfare room on the 3rd floor, a room Sloan was not allowed to enter. Your Honor, May Halden's voice was sharp, cutting through the oppressive quiet. We are not here to discuss my client's capabilities as a mother. We are here to discuss the legitimacy of the agency filing this petition. The man representing the FCCA, a bland individual in a rumpled suit, stood up. The Federal Crime and Commerce Authority has the full mandate of The mandate of whom? Exactly, May interrupted, holding up a tablet. Because I have here the metadata for the custody order. Petition number 9 Delta 44. The judge, a woman named O'Malley with tired eyes, leaned forward. And what does it show, Miss Halden? It shows the petition was digitally signed and filed at 14:02 on Tuesday. And I have here, May swiped the screen, a server receipt from the Aegis Meridian Fund documenting an internal data transfer, timestamped at 14:02 on Tuesday, to the exact second, Your Honor. This petition wasn't filed with the court. It was generated by the petitioner's financial backers and injected into the court system. A ripple of shock went through the courtroom. The FCCA lawyer's face went pale. Objection. That's conjecture, the FCCA. We often coordinate with Harbor City Family Services, HCFS. Their files will corroborate our findings. Ah, yes, HCFS, May said, a thin, dangerous smile playing on her lips. I subpoenaed their file on my client as well. It's curious. Your Honor, the file is corrupt. The checksum failed. She projected the data error code onto the main screen. This file isn't just corrupt, it's a digital fabrication that wasn't even coded correctly. 2 fake agencies, Your Honor, both originating from the same server. This is not a custody hearing, it is a high-tech abduction. Judge O'Malley looked at the FCCA representative, her expression turning to stone. Sir, you have 10 seconds to explain to me why I should not hold you in contempt. And the lights went out. The courtroom was plunged into absolute darkness, followed by the immediate, panicked shouts of the gallery. The red emergency lights flickered on, casting demonic shadows on the walls. Sloan gasped, reaching for Cassian's arm in the dark. He was already gone. He had slipped out of his seat the instant the power cut. His phone vibrated in his hand, a text from Ivy. Black Swan unit moving. Garage. Citing security protocol for the child. They weren't just buying time. They were taking June. Cassian was in the marble hallway, his silhouette framed against the emergency light. He pressed the phone to his ear, his voice a low command. Ivy, now. Code 012 Aegis break. Executing, her voice came back, tinny and distant. It's a fake X.509 security patch. When the court server reboots, it'll treat the Aegis server as a threat and sever the connection. They'll be locked out of their own back door. Good, Enzo. He spoke into his cuff. Lobby. They are moving the girl. Stop the car. Do not engage the men. The girl is the priority. He turned and walked back into the courtroom just as the main generators kicked in and the lights flooded the room. Everyone was disoriented. May Halden was already on her feet. Your Honor, in light of this obvious attempt at intimidation and evidence tampering, I must insist on a closed session. My client is a whistleblower. Her identity and her testimony must be protected, effective immediately. I am filing for an emergency protective seal. Judge O'Malley, visibly furious at the breach in her courtroom, slammed her gavel. Granted, this hearing is sealed. Everyone out. Now. Cassian grabbed Sloane's hand. Come on, we're getting June. They bypassed the public elevator, Cassian using a key card on a private judicial lift. The doors opened, and there, standing in the mirrored car, was June, flanked by 2 imposing Black Swan agents. This child is in federal custody, one agent started. Cassian D'Amico didn't say a word. He simply stepped into the elevator. His presence, his sheer, unadulterated authority was a physical force. The agents, who were trained to handle terrified civilians, had no protocol for a man who looked at them as if they were stains on the carpet. Enzo, Cassian said, Holding the door open button, his driver appeared in the hallway, flanked by two other men. The Black Swan agents looked at Cassian, then at the three men who had just arrived, and made a business decision. They stepped out of the elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing Cassian, Sloane, and June inside the small, silent box. The moment the doors closed, Sloane's composure shattered. She pulled June into her arms, burying her face in her daughter's hair, her body shaking with a relief so profound it was painful. June, silent and pale, wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. The elevator began its smooth descent. Sloane was trembling, her legs giving way. She stumbled, and Cassian put a hand on her back to steady her. She didn't just lean on him, she collapsed against him. She rested her head on his shoulder. One arm still wrapped around June, the other hand gripping the lapel of Cassian's suit like a lifeline. He was warm, solid. He smelled of clean linen and something metallic, like the rain. He didn't pat her back or offer empty words. He simply stood, a stone wall against which she could finally, for 1 second, rest. His hand was still on her back, large and steady, a point of absolute stillness in the chaos. The silence in the elevator was thick with sirens from outside and the frantic beat of Sloane's heart. She raised her head, her eyes meeting his. They were inches apart. He looked at her, and his gaze was not one of pity, but of profound, unwavering commitment. A promise was made in that small, mirrored space, a vow sealed without a single word. The elevator chimed, the doors opening to the secure garage. The promise was broken by a voice, cold and amused. A D'Amico, in a courthouse, defending a... What is she? A file clerk? Gideon Rook stood across the garage, flanked by his own men. He was smiling, a predator's smile. I wondered what it would take to draw you out, Cassian, Rook said, stepping forward into the light. He ignored Sloane completely. His eyes locked on the man whose family he hated. This isn't your business, Rook, Cassian said, his voice flat, his body positioned slightly in front of Sloane and June. You made it my business when you interfered, Gideon said. He straightened his tie. But then, your family always did like to play savior, didn't they? My family's blood debt isn't paid. Cassian, not by a long shot. It was no longer about a whistleblower. It was no longer about a data file. Gideon Rook had just made it personal. The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof of Warehouse 7, a relentless, deafening drumbeat that sealed them off from the world. This was D'Amico territory, a long-forgotten part of the port, its vast interior now used only to store empty, unbranded shipping barrels. A single string of yellow work lights cast deep shadows, illuminating the small, dry space Cassian's men had prepared. Steam rose in a plume from an electric kettle, the only source of warmth. In a small, glass-paneled office to the side, June was asleep on a cot, buried under 2 heavy blankets. She had succumbed to exhaustion the moment she knew she was safe, her small body finally surrendering. Cassian stood by the main rolling door, listening to the storm, his back to Sloane. She sat on an overturned crate, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea she hadn't touched. How did you know? She asked, her voice barely a whisper above the rain. He turned, his expression unreadable in the dim light. How did I know what... The code, Ordinance 12? She looked down into her mug. I thought it was just a story, a myth. Cassian walked closer, stopping a few feet from her. It was never a myth, but it was a secret. How did you know it? Sloane took a shaky breath. My older brother, David, years ago. Before he went to law school, he was a summer intern at your father's old law firm, the legitimate one, she added quickly. He admired your father. He used to come home and tell me stories about the old guard, about men who operated by a different set of rules. He called it a moral code for immoral men. He told me about the ordinance, about the Zeta Triangle. She looked over at the dark office where June slept. When this started, when I knew they were watching me, when I felt so powerless, I taught June a variation of it. The napkin drops, the milk. I told her it was a game, a secret language just for us, in case we ever got separated. Her voice broke. I never thought she would actually have to use it. Cassian watched her, his gaze softening. She was shivering, whether from the cold or the confession, he couldn't tell. He moved, and she flinched. A small, involuntary movement. He stopped, then proceeded with deliberate slowness. He slid his heavy wool coat from his own shoulders and draped it over hers. The residual warmth from his body enveloped her, along with his scent, something clean and sharp, like cedar and cold air. He sat on a crate next to her, not too close, but not far. The wool was heavy on her shoulders, a tangible weight of protection. Their shoulders brushed. She stiffened, but he didn't move away. She could feel the solid muscle and warmth through the fabric. She could count his breaths, slow and steady, next to her own, which were shallow and fast. Sloane looked up at him, her face pale in the yellow light, her eyes wide with fear and a dawning, complex gratitude. She lifted a hand, pressing it flat against his chest, beneath the fine cotton of his shirt. His heart hammered, a steady, powerful rhythm that seemed to answer the frantic beat of her own. It was solid, real. Cassian watched her, his gaze intense. He lifted one hand, his calloused thumb brushing a stray piece of hair from her cheek. He gently cupped her chin, tilting her face toward his. He paused, his eyes searching hers, a silent question that demanded an honest answer. In response, Sloane let her eyes close, a near imperceptible exhale of breath. That was all the consent he needed. He lowered his head, and his lips met hers. It was not a kiss of frantic passion, but of deep, grounding certainty. It was warm and slow and absolute. There was no demand, only an offering. His hand moved from her chin to her shoulder, his grip firm. His other hand settled on her upper back, holding her steady, a simple, safe anchor. Their breaths mingled, a shared sigh in the quiet warehouse. He pulled back, just enough to rest his forehead against hers. "From now on," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion she had not heard before, "I am the wall for you and your daughter." She leaned into him, her hand still pressed to his chest, and for a long moment they stayed that way, a shared space of warmth and impossible promises, hidden by the storm. A sound from outside broke the spell, a metal clang, a footstep on the wet gravel near the side door. Instantly, Cassian's hand was on her arm, a silent signal for silence. He was on his feet, his body a shadow. The romantic, quiet man was gone, and the dawn was in his place. The door of the small office creaked open. "Mommy?" June stood there, her eyes wide with sleep and fear. "It's okay, baby, come here." Sloane rushed to her, scooping her up. As she held June, Cassian moved, and he didn't go to the door. He placed himself between them and the main warehouse entrance, a tactical shift, blocking the largest point of egress. He was listening, his head tilted, his focus absolute. He reached back, his hand searching in the darkness. He didn't look. His fingers simply found Sloane's. He didn't just hold her hand, he grasped it, lacing his fingers with hers, a hard, anchoring grip that said, "I am here. Do not move." The romance had become a life-or-death alliance. The tenderness was now a lifeline. The sounds outside faded, a false alarm, a piece of metal siding loosened by the wind. Cassian let out a slow breath, but he did not release her hand. He turned to her, his face still hard with the adrenaline of the threat. He unclipped a thin, beautifully crafted knife from the sheath at the small of his back. He pressed the hilt into Sloane's free hand. It was old, the metal dark, but she could feel the etching on the pommel. A triangle, with a Z inside. "This is my family's," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Keep it. If you are ever separated from me, if you must leave me and I am not there, leave this mark where I can find it." He locked his eyes on hers, the promise from his kiss now a deadly, serious vow. I will find it, and I will find you. The plan was formed in the pre-dawn hours, sketched on the back of a shipping manifest in the cold warehouse. Aegis Meridian was a fortress, but its weakness was its own arrogance. They're a tech company pretending to be a charity, Sloane said, her voice firm. The fear from the night before burned away by a cold, analytical anger. Their security is cutting edge, but it's all outward-facing. They believe they're untouchable. Their server room, Ivy said, her face illuminated by her laptop, a web of blueprints appearing on the screen. It's on the top floor, biometrically sealed, and it requires a 3-factor authentication to access the root ledger, a physical token from the CFO, a key from the lead network engineer, and Gideon Rook's own executive override. We can't get all 3, Priya Ash said, checking her equipment. Priya was Cassian's tactician, a woman who moved with the silent grace of a dancer and had the eyes of a hawk. We don't need all 3, Sloane said, pointing to the screen. I recognize this architecture. It's a distributed cloud. If we can get a physical token into the room, Ivy can spoof the other 2 from the outside, but we have to get in. I have the token, Cassian said quietly. The others looked at him. The fake CFO, the woman at the diner, Cassian explained. She wears her token as a ring. My team acquired it from her hotel room an hour ago while she was at a gala. That leaves physical access, Priya said. Sloane knows the system. She and I go in, Cassian stated, leaving no room for argument. Boss, no, Priya protested. It's too high risk. Let me... She knows the cloud architecture, Cassian cut her off. I know how to get past the sensors. We go in from the roof. Ivy, you're our eyes. Noah. He looked at his driver. A man named Vale. You're the distraction. I want the Black Swan unit chasing your shadow. I'll take them to Mariner's Cut. Noah grinned. They'll be busy. I'm going with you, Sloane said, her gaze locked on Cassian. It was not a request. They took my life. I'm going to be there when we take the proof. Cassian looked at her for a long, silent moment. He saw the steel that had been forged in her terror. He nodded once. You do not leave my side, not for an inch. At 2 a.m., the rain was a torrential downpour, a perfect cover. Phase 1 began, from a van parked 3 blocks away. Ivy Cross launched her assault. She didn't attack Aegis. She attacked the social media accounts of its top 50 donors, triggering a fake, automated, personally identifiable information alert that sent the Aegis Compliance Department into a panic. As predicted, a junior compliance officer working from home opened a secure VPN port to investigate the breach. Ivy smiled. I'm in their network. Go, Cassian. The roof is yours. Phase 2 was vertical. The Aegis building was glass and steel. Cassian and Sloane, dressed in black, moved up the maintenance ladder on the adjoining building. Cassian unspooled a magnetic guideline, firing it across the gap. It thunked silently against the metal housing of the HVAC unit. The roof is pressure-plated, Cassian murmured, his voice in her ear. The sensors are heat and motion. We move on the beam. He clipped her harness to the line first. I am right behind you. Sloane took a breath and stepped off the ledge, her feet finding the narrow structural beam. The rain was a physical blow, the wind screaming around her. She moved, hand over hand, above a 9-story drop. Halfway across, her boot slipped on the wet metal. She didn't fall, but she swung, her body lurching violently. She cried out, a sound stolen by the wind, before she could swing a second time. Cassian's hand was there. He had closed the distance in a second, his grip like a steel vise on her harness, pulling her flush against him. She was plastered to his chest, her face pressed into his neck, her arms wrapped around him in pure reflex. She was shaking. I have you, he said, his voice a low rumble in her ear. He didn't move, just held her, suspended in the storm, until he felt her breathing start to even out. She pulled back, her face inches from his. In the dark, she could just see the glint of his eyes. A small, relieved laugh escaped her. You said not to leave your side." "I said not for an inch," he replied, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He didn't let go immediately. Their eyes held, a moment of warmth and adrenaline in the freezing rain. He released her harness, his hand sliding to her waist, steadying her. "Let's go." They breached the roof hatch and were in the server room in minutes. It was cold, the hum of the servers a low, powerful thrum. "Noah's running," Ivy's voice crackled in their earpieces. "Black Swan is taking the bait. You have 5 minutes." "Sloan," Cashin said. Sloan moved to the main console. She slipped the CFO's ring onto her finger and pressed it to the biometric scanner. The light turned amber. "It's accepted the token. Ivy, it's you. They're using a 2-point social verification, the network engineer." "On it," Ivy said. "I'm already in his social media. His dog's name is Thor. His mother's maiden name is Gleason, and his favorite bar is the Rusty Anchor." The amber light on the console flashed green. "We are in," Sloan whispered, her fingers flying across the terminal. "I'm accessing the root directory. I have the ledger, the real one." "Copy it," Cassian said, his eyes on the door. "Copying? It's encrypted. Running the decrypt. 90% done. It's on our drive." Sloan pulled the drive, a triumphant, tearful smile on her face. She turned to Cassian. "We got it." As she said it, a monitor on the far wall, previously dark, flickered to life. Gideon Rook's face filled the screen. He was not in an office. He was somewhere dark, and he was smiling. He slowly, deliberately, applauded. "Bravo," his voice echoed in the cold room. "Truly, a D'Amico, on his knees, picking locks, a data clerk who thinks she's a spy. It's beautiful." "It's over, Rook," Sloan spat. "We have the ledger." "You have a copy," Gideon corrected, his smile never wavering. "A copy of things I was already planning to erase, but you have given me an opportunity for a much cleaner solution." He leaned closer to the camera. "A negotiation. Cassian, a matter of honor, between families. The Orpheum Theater, tomorrow at noon. We settle this the old-fashioned way." "I don't make deals with you," Cassian said. Gideon's smile vanished. "You will, or at 9 a.m., the recustody order for the child, the one Judge O'Malley so helpfully sealed, will be unsealed and enforced, and this time there will be no legal tricks. June will be on a plane to an international support program by 1 p.m. He held up a signed, stamped piece of paper. "A trap for a trap. Cassian. See you at the theater." The screen went black. Sloan looked at Cassian, the triumph gone, replaced by a new, colder fear. "He's right, it's a trap." "Yes," Cassian said, his hand closing over the drive in her hand, "but it's also a stage, and he just gave us an audience." He looked at the black screen, his mind already 3 steps ahead. "It's time to bring your daughter into the light." The Orpheum Theater was a tomb of velvet and gilded plaster. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light illuminating the stage. The rows of red velvet seats were empty, a silent, waiting audience for a tragedy. Gideon Rook walked onto the center of the stage, his footsteps echoing in the vast, empty house. He did not look at Cassian, who stood in the aisle near the front. Gideon looked up, as if speaking to the ghosts in the balcony, his face caught in the harsh, singular spotlight. "My brother, Cal," Gideon's voice boomed, theatrically amplified by the theater's acoustics. "He was a good kid, stupid, loyal, but good. And your father, Cassian, he saved him from a fire, played the hero. That's what the Ordinance 12 is for. Isn't it heroics?" He paced the stage, the light following him. "But what happens after the rescue? D'Amico, where was your father when Cal needed a real lifeline? Cal was adrift. He made a mistake. A storage warehouse. He was in over his head. He died in another fire, abandoned." Gideon finally turned, his eyes pinning Cassian in the aisle. "That's the problem with your selective morality. You save who you want, when you want. You play God, but you never stick around for the consequences." My brother died because your father's honor was just a performance. Cassian's voice, in contrast, was quiet, yet it carried to every corner of the theater. He was abandoned, that part is true. He began to walk slowly down the center aisle, toward the stage. Cal was in over his head because you put him there, Cassian said, his voice a low, cold blade. He was skimming from your own accounts. Gideon, he was desperate. He didn't die in a fire. He was executed, and the fire was set to cover the tracks. Cassian stepped up onto the stage, moving out of the darkness and into the edge of Gideon's light. He wasn't abandoned by my father. He was murdered by his own brother. The men who lit the match were Combine. Your men. You didn't lose a brother, you cut a loose end. Gideon's practiced smile twitched. Lies, slander from a dying family. It's not slander if there's proof, a new voice said. On cue, Sloane emerged from the stage right wing. She was not dressed for a fight. She was dressed for a testimony, in a simple, dark dress. June was at her side, her small hand gripping hers. They did not look at Gideon. They walked with purpose past the two men, toward the orchestra pit. Sitting in the front row, looking for all the world like a spectator who had arrived early, was May Halden. Her tablet was raised. A small, whisper-quiet drone hovered near the proscenium arch, its blue light active. The Armitage Citizens Council is watching. Gideon, May said, her voice clear. They are a small, independent body, but they are very interested in the financial records of the Aegis Meridian Fund. Sloane knelt and handed the data drive to May. Here is the ledger, she said, her voice shaking but clear. Gideon's face contorted. The trap was not for Cassian. It was for him. Fools, he hissed. The heavy velvet curtains at every exit rustled. Black Swan agents, at least a dozen, stepped into the theater, blocking every aisle, their dark suits melting into the shadows. Cassian didn't hesitate. He grabbed Sloane's arm. This way, now! He pulled her and June back across the stage, past the bewildered Gideon, toward the stairs leading to the basement. The Black Swan agents on stage moved to intercept. Priya, Cassian yelled, From the balcony, a high-intensity spotlight, blinding and white, snapped on, hitting the agents' faces. They recoiled, momentarily blinded. It was all the time Cassian needed. He shoved Sloane and June through a heavy steel door marked sub-stage access and followed them into the darkness of the stairwell. He slammed the door, fumbling for the lock, his men already engaging the Black Swan unit on the stage above. He found the deadbolt and slammed it home. Sloane was pressed against the brick wall, breathing hard, June clinging to her, in the dark. Cassian found her. He put both hands on her face, his palms warm against her cold skin. They'll be waiting for us outside, she whispered, her voice fractured with terror. I know, he said. He kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion. It was short, hard, and desperate. It was a brand, a promise. No matter what happens, he said, his forehead pressed to hers, his breath hot, I will find you. He turned, unlocked the door, and stepped back out onto the stage, locking it from the outside, leaving them in the relative safety of the tunnels. Gideon's lead agent was waiting for him. The fight was brutal and fast. Cassian was not a brawler, he was a tactician. He used the agent's size against him, redirecting, blocking, striking at joints and nerve centers. He fought with a disciplined, cold fury, but his strikes were disabling, not lethal. He was holding to his code. Gideon watched, his face a mask of rage. The drone was still filming. Shut it down, he roared. He ripped a control panel from the stage manager's desk and slammed a button. With a whoosh, a bank of cold spark pyrotechnics along the stage flared to life, a blinding shower of white static, designed to overwhelm the drone's sensors. The feed would be useless. Gideon laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He had finally taken control. Then he looked up. On the ornate, domed ceiling of the Orpheum, a new image appeared. It flickered, then focused. It was the stage. It was Cassian. It was Gideon. The audio, clear as a bell, was of Gideon's laugh. In the projection booth, Priya Ash smiled. The drone was a decoy. The real camera, hardwired and projector-fed, was in the orchestra pit. The entire performance was still being broadcast. Gideon saw his face, twisted in rage, projected onto the ceiling. He was trapped. He motioned for his agent to fall back. "This isn't over," he snarled at Cassian, his voice low and shaking with a new, personal hatred. "Next time. It's not an invitation." He and his men vanished into the wings, melting away as quickly as they had appeared. The theater was silent again. Cassian walked to the steel door and unlocked it. Sloane stumbled out, her legs giving way. He caught her, pulling her against his chest. She was shaking violently, the adrenaline crashing, her hands gripping his suit. He didn't speak. He just held her, his hand stroking the back of her head, absorbing the tremors, a solid, unmoving anchor in the chaos. He let her cry, her fear finally pouring out. After a long moment, June stepped out of the darkness. She walked up to the two of them and put her small arms around both their waists, burying her face in Cassian's coat, a small, broken and defiant family, standing alone on the empty stage. The victory at the Orpheum was measured in minutes. The counterattack was measured in seconds. Gideon Rook, exposed and humiliated, did not retreat. He attacked. By dawn, Sloane's bank accounts were frozen. An emergency lien from Aegis Meridian cited misappropriation of corporate assets, a blatant, fabricated lie. An hour later, a new email arrived from the fake Harbor City Family Services. It was a formal, expedited removal order for Juniper Whitaker, citing imminent danger posed by the mother's unstable associations. They had 24 hours. "He's not just using the fake agencies anymore," May Halden said, her voice tight with fury over a secure line. They were gathered back at the warehouse, the air thick with impending doom. "He's wrapping the lies in real legal armor. He's using Sloane's own frozen assets as proof of her criminal activity. It's a closed loop, and I just found out why he knew how to hit us." She looked at Cassian, her face grim. "We have a traitor. I ran a check on everyone who knew this location. No avail. His sister has a debilitating medical condition. Aegis Meridian made a charitable donation to her hospital fund 3 days ago, an old gambling debt he owed the Combine. They didn't just buy him, they leveraged him." Cassian's face was stone. He looked at Priya. "Where is he?" He was supposed to be running perimeter." Priya's voice trailed off as the realization hit her. "He's not checking in. Oh, God. He didn't just give them the location. Cassian, he just turned off our security." The first thud was the sound of a magnetic lock on the main door being overpowered. The second was the shatter of the skylight. "Black Swan," Priya yelled. "Go, go, go!" It was chaos. 2 black-clad figures rappelled from the ceiling, dropping tear gas canisters. Cassian grabbed Sloane, pulling her and June toward the back exit. "Ivy, Priya with me." "Get the girl!" a voice shouted from the door. Ivy Cross was already at the secondary door, her laptop clutched in one hand, typing a code to override the lock. As the door sprang open, revealing an old, dark tunnel, one of the Black Swan agents rounded the corner, his weapon raised, aimed directly at June. "No!" Ivy screamed. She didn't think. She threw her body, a small, desperate shield, in front of the child. The agent fired. The sound was a dull thwack. Ivy cried out, a sharp, choked sound, as she crumpled to the ground, a dark stain spreading on her shoulder. "Ivy!" Sloane screamed. The agent raised his weapon for a second shot, but Cassian was already moving. He was a blur of violence. His rage a cold, precise instrument. The agent was disarmed and neutralized in 3 seconds, his body slumping to the floor. Cassian didn't pause. He scooped Ivy up, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Sloane pressure now. Sloane ripped off her own jacket, balling it up and pressing it hard against Ivy's bleeding shoulder as Cassian carried her into the darkness. "It's an old sewer main, he said, his voice strained from the exertion. "It leads to the river. Move." They ran through the dark, rank tunnels for what felt like hours. The only sounds, the drip of water, June's terrified sobs, and Ivy's pained, shallow breathing. They emerged under a pier and into the waiting, silent engine of a D'Amico boat. By the time the storm broke again, they were in the tide-glass penthouse, a fortress of glass and steel high above the city, the one place Gideon Rook did not know Cassian owned. June was asleep in a king-sized bed, the first true safety she had known in days. Ivy was in another room, stabilized, a private D'Amico doctor stitching her shoulder. She was lucky, the doctor had said. Another inch and it would have been her lung. In the main room, the city lights blurred by the rain. Sloane worked on Cassian. He had taken a deep gash on his forearm during the fight, a knife wound he had not even mentioned. She sat before him, the first aid kit open. Her hands, finally, were steady. "This will sting," she said, her voice a low murmur. "It's not the first," he said. He was sitting, his shirt off. She cleaned the wound, her touch gentle, clinical. But as she worked, her fingers brushed against a long, puckered scar on his ribs. She paused, tentatively. She traced it. A silent question. "A gift," he said, his voice quiet, "from my uncle, when I was 20. Her fingers moved to another, a small, circular scar near his collarbone. "A misunderstanding in Naples," he said. Her hand, now damp with antiseptic, moved to his chest, tracing the lines of his body, reading the history written on his skin. He was a map of controlled violence, of a life she could not imagine. He was also the man who had taught her daughter a secret code of safety. He watched her, his gaze heavy. He lifted a hand, touching her hair, still damp from the escape. He didn't pull her to him. He simply laid his palm against her cheek. She leaned into the touch, a long, shuddering sigh escaping her. He moved, his forehead coming to rest against hers. His heart was beating, strong and steady, beneath her hand. Her own heart felt like it was answering it. They just breathed, sharing the same air, their eyes closed, a promise of absolute, unspoken trust passing between them. He kissed her hair, a chaste, desperate press of his lips. A small cry came from the bedroom. "Mommy?" They broke apart, but not completely. His hand slid from her face to her hand. Sloane looked toward the bedroom. "I'm here, baby," she called, her voice soft. She squeezed his hand. "I'll be right back." She soothed June, the quiet murmur of her voice a balm. She returned a minute later. Cassian was standing by the window, watching the storm. She came up beside him, and without a word, she slid her hand back into his. He laced his fingers with hers, a perfect, tight fit. "We are together," she whispered. In the morning, the storm had passed. Noah Vale stood in the center of the living room, his face a ruin of shame. Cassian was cold. "You have two choices," Cassian said. "You leave this room, and I will not stop you, but you will be hunted by Gideon and you will be disavowed by me, or you will atone." "How?" Noah whispered, his voice broken. "He has my sister. I never wanted—" "I know what he has," Cassian said. "Atonement. Give me something I can use, something that proves your loyalty is here." Noah looked at Sloane, at the empty room where Ivy was recovering. He took a deep breath. "The transport routes, the ones he uses for the International Support Program. I know them. I can give them to Priya." He looked at Cassian. "And I know where he lives." "I don't care where he lives," Cassian said. "I care where he works." Ivy, pale and bandaged, spoke from her laptop across the room. "I found it, based on the ledger. It's not just a server, it's a place. A digital bunker under the old Port Authority building. They call it Helix Station. It's where the FCCA is born. It's where the route certificates are signed. Every 12 hours. The final plan clicked into place. We hit Helix, Cassian said. We download the original chain of certificates. We give them to May, and she gives them to the Citizens Council. We don't just stop him. We dismantle his entire network. He'll be waiting, Priya warned. As if on cue, Ivy's monitor flashed. Boss, you need to see this. It was a public video message from Gideon Rook, posted on the Armitage Citizens Council website. It showed Sloan. It showed June. It showed the gate of the old Port Authority building. An open invitation, Gideon said to the camera. To Cassian D'Amico, come to Helix Station if you do. I will personally ensure this unfit mother is reunited with her child right before she is taken, permanently. It was a psychological execution. He was daring Cassian, using Sloan and June as public bait. Cassian was silent for a full minute. Then he turned to Ivy. Set up the camera. His response was posted an hour later. It was just his face. No theatrics. He did not speak to Gideon. He spoke to the city. My father told me about a promise, and he said, his voice calm, clear, and absolute. He called it an ordinance. Power is not to be held, it is to be shelter. He looked directly into the lens. A vow to the one woman watching. I am coming to Helix Station, and I am bringing the shelter. Helix Station was a tower of glass perched on the edge of the oldest, darkest pier in Port Armitage. It was an affront to the city's history. And tonight, it was a fortress under siege. Inside the main server room, a digital clock on the wall glowed red. 12 minutes. That was the window. 12 minutes until the FCCA's root certificates automatically renewed, locking in Gideon's power and sealing June's fate. The assault was simultaneous. Go, Cassian ordered, his voice low over the comms. The first prong was redemption. Noah Vale, driving a heavy, armored sedan, lit up the night, leading two identical decoys on a suicidal chase away from the pier. The Black Swan units guarding the entrance, arrogant and overconfident, took the bait. Tires squealed as the main security force vanished into the city. The second prong was digital. In a van parked 2 blocks away, Ivy, her arm in a sling, managed the network intrusion. Beside her, Sloane's eyes were locked on the code. I'm past the firewall. I'm in. The third prong was physical. Cassian and Priya moved like shadows through the sub-level maintenance tunnels. They emerged into the infrastructure floor, a cold, humming cavern of server racks. The air was sterile and still, too still. The entire far wall lit up. It was a massive screen, and Gideon Rook was on it, smiling. A D'Amico, crawling through the sewers. How appropriate. A man in an expensive suit stood beside him. Caleb Vint, Rook's information warfare specialist. You've come for the root of my power, Cassian, Gideon said, his voice echoing. I thought I'd show you yours. The screen flashed, grainy images, black and white, a burning factory, a body on the docks, a secret meeting. The darkest, most brutal moments of the D'Amico family's rise to power. This is your legacy, Gideon sneered. All this talk of honor, of shelter. Your family's shelter was built on the bones of the weak. 2 Black Swan agents, held in reserve, stepped from the shadows. Cassian didn't look at the screen. He moved to engage. As he fought, his voice was a cold, steady counterpoint to Gideon's monologue. My family's past is written in blood, Cassian said, blocking a strike. He used the agent's momentum, slamming him into a rack. That is why I know its weight. You are a hypocrite, Gideon roared. The ordinance is not about being clean, Cassian said, disarming the second agent with a brutal, precise motion. It is about drawing a line. He turned to the camera, his breathing even. Power is not to be held. It is to be shelter, and you... He looked at Gideon. You prey on children. Sloan now, he yelled. I'm at the public key infrastructure, Sloane's voice came over the comms, echoing in the room. I'm using the token. A harsh, synthesized buzz. Access denied. It's not working, Sloane cried. It's asking for a biometric, the original signatory, the root key. Gideon's laughter was deafening. Did you really think I'd leave the master key on a ring? The screen changed, displaying the authorization prompt. Original signatory biometric required, and beneath it, the name Gideon Rook. I am the root, Cassian, Gideon gloated. I am the FCCA, without my voice, my print, my authorization. You can't undo a single thing. You've lost. In the van, Sloane was frozen. His voice. Ivy, Sloane said, her voice sharp. The Orpheum, the recording of the play, when he was on stage. Do you have it? I have everything, Ivy said, confused. It's a voice print lock, Sloane said, her fingers flying. He just gave us the passkey, his own gloating. But it's not just the audio, it's the vibration. Ivy, get me the security feed from this room right now. The glass panel on that server rack he's pointing at. Ivy's eyes widened. The reflection. The micro vibrations from his voice. Sloane, you are terrifying. Do it. Patching the audio from the Orpheum, synthesizing a key from the glass vibrations. I'm building the lockpick. Ivy muttered. Gideon was still talking. It's over, give up, and I'll let the girl say goodbye. Engaging, Sloane said. In the server room, the screen flashed. Biometric authentication accepted. Certificate revocation initiated. Gideon's face fell. The smile evaporated, replaced by a mask of pure disbelief. What? How? The moment of his shock was the moment the main doors to the control room burst open. Shredded by microcharges, a full squad of Black Swan agents poured in. They were too late. In the safety car, a block away, May Halden was watching the breach on a separate tactical feed, June beside her, saw the men in black, the raised weapons. She looked at the small webcam May had aimed at her, the one streaming to the Citizens Council. June's face was pale, but she was calm. She lifted her hand, she touched her ear. I am listening. Her shoulder. I am strong. Her heart. I am safe. He's right, May said, watching her drone feed. The good people are here. The main gates to the pier, the ones Noah had lured the guards away from, swung open. A convoy of cars, not police, but news vans and private cars rolled onto the pier. The Armitage Citizens Council and the independent press. Ivy, they're at the gate, go public, May shouted. Going, Ivy said. In the Helix control room, the giant screens that had shown Cashin's past now showed the truth. The revocation of the certificates. Live. And then, a list. The names, badge numbers, and bank accounts of every fake FCCA and HCFS agent, streaming directly to the press. Every illegal custody order was now void. Gideon Rook, his face a mask of absolute fury, screamed he had lost. He lunged, but not at Cassian. From a side door, Gideon himself appeared. His ruse revealed, he grabbed Sloane, who had just entered the room, and yanked her back, pressing a gun to her head. It's not over, he shrieked, his eyes wild. Drop your weapons, all of you, or she dies. The room froze. Cassian, his own gun leveled, looked at Sloane. Her eyes met his, filled with terror, but also with an unyielding trust. His gun clattered to the floor. Kick it away. Cassian did. He raised his hands, his gaze locked on Gideon. He took one slow step forward. It's over, Gideon, let her go. One more step and I'll... The world ceased to exist, a sound, not of an explosion, but of a dying giant, a tearing, grinding crash, echoed from outside. The lights, the screens, the emergency spots, every single light in the building went out. Noah Vale had completed his atonement, driving his 3-ton sedan at 60 miles an hour directly into the station's backup generator. Pitch black. Sloane felt a rush of cold air. A hand, hard as steel, grabbed her, yanking her down and away. She heard a sickening, hollow crack as Cassian moved, a phantom in the dark, followed by the thud of a body hitting the floor. She was pulled upright into his arms, his body a solid wall. I have you, he breathed. A small, green light flickered in the darkness. Gideon was on the floor, his hands cuffed, but he was laughing. A broken, wheezing sound. The green light was a digital timer, fixed to the pier's main support column. It read 45 seconds. You can't stop the signal, Gideon choked out, blood in his teeth. The pier shuddered, a deep structural groan that vibrated up from the concrete. 45 seconds. The green timer was a beacon of death. Black, oily water from the harbor surged through the ruined generator room, flooding the lower levels. "Here! Priya, get Ivy out of here!" Cashin's voice was a command that tolerated no argument. He was already moving toward the bomb. "Get the press clear. Evacuate the pier." Priya, supporting the bleeding Ivy, looked back. "Boss, you cannot stop that. Death. Go." They ran. Cashin turned to the device. It was military, complex, and wired directly into the pier's main support. He had 30 seconds. Sloan was still there, not behind him, but beside him. "Sloan, I told you to go. Get to June." "June is safe with May," she said, her voice astoundingly calm. She was looking at the device, not the timer. "You said we chose this together. I am not leaving you. Tell me what to do." He stared at her for one precious second, seeing not the terrified mother from the diner, but the engineer who had broken Helix. He saw a warrior. "The trigger circuit is here," he said, his fingers already working, pulling the casing off. "But it's power-linked. If I cut the circuit, the battery needs to be pulled at the exact same instant or it shorts the detonator." He pointed to a heavy, magnetically sealed battery block. "That's the lock. It's a 2-stage release. 2 clips on the left, 1 on the right. It's a rhythmic override." Sloan looked at the mechanism. 2, 1. The code that had started everything. The code that had saved her daughter. "The 2-1 beat," she breathed. "On my mark," Cassian said, his eyes on the wire. 20 seconds. A shadow moved in the dark. "If I die," a voice choked. "We all die." Gideon Rook, his cuffs broken, his face a mask of blood and fury, launched himself from the floor. He tackled Cassian, slamming him away from the bomb. 10 seconds. Sloan screamed. Cassian and Gideon grappled on the wet floor, a desperate, brutal fight in the flickering green light. Bang! The shot was deafening, echoing off the concrete. Gideon froze. He looked down, expecting pain. The bullet had sparked on the ground an inch from his head. In the doorway, Ivy Cross was leaning against the frame, her face white, her body trembling. Her uninjured arm was outstretched, clutching Priya's heavy sidearm. "I said," she panted, "don't move." In that instant, the first of the press, accompanied by the Citizens' Council, rounded the corner. Flashbulbs erupted, capturing the scene. Ivy, the smoking gun in her hand, Gideon, defeated on the floor, Cassian rising, and Sloan, her eyes fixed on the bomb. 5 seconds. Cassian scrambled back to the panel. Sloan now. He grabbed the trigger wire. 4. Sloan's hands were on the battery. 3. She yanked the 2 left clips. 2. She yanked the single right clip. 1. The heavy battery pack ripped free from the housing, clattering to the floor. The green timer stopped. 0, 0, 1. For a beat, the only sound was the alarms and the water. Then, with a heavy, hydraulic groan, the city's emergency grid kicked in. The lights of the pier, the city, the bridges, they flared to life, illuminating the port, chasing away the shadows. Port Armitage breathed again. The fall of the Northbridge Combine was not a secret war. It was a public execution. The data from Helix Station, combined with the testimony of the press, was absolute. Aegis Meridian was dissolved, its assets seized. The phantom agencies, FCCA and HCFS, evaporated, their illegal rulings triggering a massive internal investigation. Gideon Rook, tried in the new Urban Integrity Court, was found guilty on dozens of counts. No avail, true to his word, turned himself in. His testimony, detailing the transport routes, was the final nail in the Combine's coffin. He received a reduced sentence. Ivy Cross recovered, her surgery and physical therapy paid for by a new public fund established by the Citizens' Council. Weeks later, the Tide-Glass penthouse was quiet. The morning sun streamed through the glass, painting the room in gold. On the floor, June was drawing, a small toy guitar resting beside her. She finished her picture, and with great seriousness, taped it to the glass of the balcony door. It was a simple logo, a small ear, a shoulder, and a bright red heart. "It's our logo," she announced. "It means this is a safe house." Sloane, watching from the kitchen, felt her heart swell. She heard a soft footstep. Cassian came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder, his chin resting on her hair. They stood there for a long moment, watching their daughter, watching the city. His breath was warm against her skin. "I choose to love you every day, Sloane," he whispered, his voice low. "I choose it the same way I choose to do what's right. For me, they have become the same thing." Sloane turned in his arms, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She looked into his eyes, the eyes that had seen her in the diner, and had never looked away. He kissed her. It was a slow, soft kiss, not of adrenaline or desperation, but of certainty. It tasted of coffee and sunlight, a promise of 1,000 more mornings, just like this, inside. June giggled, strumming a happy, discordant chord on her guitar, the sound of a chosen family. Later, Cassian knelt in front of June. He held out the etched, ancient dagger with the Zeta triangle on the hilt. "June," he said, his voice serious, "I need you to be the keeper of this." Her eyes went wide. She took it, her small hands holding the weight. "It's a reminder," he said, "a promise. When you see someone who needs help, someone who is scared, you just touch your ear, your shoulder, and your heart, and you remember that good people are always near." His final act as Don was not in shadow. He signed a new charter, a new Ordinance 12. It was not a secret code. It was a public document filed with the Citizens' Council, a pledge of cooperation, a bridge from the old world to the new. The last view is of the harbor, the water calm, the Helix Pier already slated for rebuilding. The light reflects off the water, and for a moment, the shape of the Zeta Triangle appears, before fading into the bright, clear day. The last thing heard is Sloane's voice, a soft, certain whisper. "We survived to love." Thank you all for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please comment below to share your thoughts and let us all connect. Remember to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Story, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.